Live from the Interaction Media Studio in Morgantown, welcome to the Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind. I'm your host, Jim Matuga, and with me as co-host this morning is Mr. Andy Nicely, the publisher at WV News. Andy, how are you this morning?
Great, Jim. How you doing?
Great, man. You're looking great today, and I'm so glad to see your smiling face as well as the rest of our panelists. It's May 7th, 2021. For those of you joining us live on Facebook, welcome and thanks for tuning in. We have a great mastermind panel of guest panel lined up for you guys today, and we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic. So we are glad you're joining us today. We welcome your live comments and questions. Just type those in the comment section of the Facebook Live on Positively WV or any of the WV News Facebook pages as well. Every time at this week, we gather like-minded business leaders from around West Virginia to this virtual meeting room to help West Virginia small business owners and small business leaders succeed. The mastermind concept was first coined by Mr. Napoleon Hill and detailed in his legendary business book, Think and Grow Rich, back in 1937. Our weekly mastermind panel is an opportunity for our viewers to eavesdrop on some of the most relevant business topics of today. We're streaming this program live on Facebook through our Positively West Virginia page, as well as our entire statewide distribution network with our media partner, WVNews.com. Positively West Virginia is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of advancing small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positivelywv.com. Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind is brought to you by the State Journal, WVNews.com, and Interaction Media. As I mentioned, we have a great group of panelists for you guys today with a special emphasis on the solar industry in West Virginia. First of all, we have Dan Conant. Dan is the owner of Solar Holler in Huntington, West Virginia. Dan's been on the show a couple of times. Dan, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We also have Erin Bottomley. She's the executive director of St. Vincent Mission. Erin, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Great. And I'm glad you're here as well. And of course, we have Evan Hansen. Evan is a business owner, small business owner in Morgantown. He owns Downstream Strategies. We'll learn about that. He's also a member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, serving as a member of the Energy and Manufacturing Committee, as well as other committees. Evan, I'm glad that you're taking some time out of the day to be on our panel this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
Guys, I'm very excited to talk about this solar industry, and it reminds me of, kind of breaking through. We have in West Virginia, we've built a legacy of coal energy, and we've got a lot of jobs that have been displaced over the years with energy transformation and moving to more sustainable green energy and all that. And we definitely value coal, but we're also embracing these new technologies. And I think about today, of course, is May 7th. Yesterday was the anniversary, May 6th, 1954, of Roger Bannister crossing the finish line to become the first person in history to break the elusive 4-minute mile mark. And it's kind of a historical date, but also kind of reminds me of something that he uttered to himself. He uttered a phrase in French, après moi déluge, which translates to after me, the flood. And I think of those pioneers of early solar who kind of broke the ground, broke the floodgates, and now we're starting to see solar appearing everywhere. Dan Conant is in the news headlines at WV News all the time, projects that they're doing. Erin, we're going to talk about her project. Evan, I know you're groundbreaking and pushing legislation and advocating for solar. You have solar panels on your business. I think that's pretty cool. But I think of companies like, just take the electric vehicle market. A lot of people have tried electronic vehicles or electric vehicles, the EV market, but Tesla came and they nailed it. And then now everybody's talking about we're moving to electric vehicles. So I think that phrase, après moi déluge, and I think I'm saying that correctly, after me, the flood, is a really cool phrase to be thinking and kicking this off. So guys, I'd like to go around the horn and get a sense of, first of all, what you guys do. I'd like to start it off with Dan. Tell us a little bit about what you do at Solar Holler and how you're coming to the meeting today.
Yeah. So we've been going for 8 years now. We've got offices in Huntington as well as Shepherdstown, West Virginia. So we're spread out across West Virginia. And really, our mission is to make solar affordable for everyone across the state. We got our start working with churches and homeless shelters and other amazing nonprofits around West Virginia. But then from there, we expanded pretty rapidly. So these days, we have an awesome team of 50 employees, growing rapidly. We do everything from the modeling and design work around imagining what these systems will look like, all the utility bill analysis, all the way through installation, financing the systems, and taking care of them for the next couple decades. So I like to talk about how this industry really takes all kinds, and it kind of shows within the team at Solar Holler, where we've got master electricians, we've got amazing designers, we've got project managers, marketing folks. It really requires all of that. The one other thing I would add before I hand it over to the other folks is we're one of the very few companies nationwide that has, one of the very few solar companies nationwide that has unionized. So actually, heading into the pandemic last year, we unionized all of our crews, joined up with the Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and we're really, really proud of that. Not just to be spearheading the solar industry here in Appalachia, but also to be, showing that it can be done with union labor.
Yeah, very interesting, Dan. And you're a young guy. The fact that you've got an 8-year-old company with 50 employees, that's very impressive. And what you're doing out there, and you and I have talked before, and I'm just a big fan of what you're doing and growing your company. Evan, I'd love to let folks know about what you do at Downstream Strategies, and then also talk a little bit about your work on the Energy and Manufacturing Committee at the state legislature.
Downstream Strategies is a West Virginia-based company. Most of us work out of the Morgantown office, but we also have small offices in Davis and Lewisburg. And we've got 15 employees right now and do a wide range of consulting work related to water and energy, science and policy, planning, food systems research, and various other things. And a lot of our work is in West Virginia and Appalachia, but we do work across the country. And, that's what got me interested in running for the legislature, was providing some testimony before legislative committees, mostly on water issues. I've been in the legislature for 3 sessions now. And in particular, the last 2 sessions, we've passed a series of very good bills that are helping to open up the solar market in West Virginia and create many new jobs, and also having positive economic impacts, not just on local communities, but on the state budget. So just real briefly, those 3 bills are in the 2020 session, we passed 2 of them. We passed the utility solar bill that allows each of our major electric utilities to develop a significant amount of solar, and they're moving forward now to do that. And they're offering that solar electricity as an option to their customers if they choose to go solar. The second bill that we passed in 2020 corrected what was a punitive tax on large-scale solar arrays. And that immediately resulted in several projects that have gone through the permitting process already that will be selling solar electricity into the grid, creating, again, lots of good jobs and local revenues. And then the third bill that we just passed a month ago was the power purchase agreement bill. And this is a financing mechanism for solar, and it allows people and businesses and nonprofits to go solar without any upfront investment on their part. A company can now come into West Virginia and build and finance the solar system, and you or your business can start saving money immediately on your electric bills without having to put the money up front.
Yeah. That's awesome. And that we can dig deeper into those bills as well here in the next hour or so, Evan, but thanks for that recap. And I also want to say that I personally appreciate you being in the legislature because you're a small business owner. You're a good friend and a good guy, and I know you personally, and I think having business owners in legislature is a good thing. So we have that aspect of it as well. And I just want to give my hat off to you on that front too. And you put your money where your mouth is. You have solar panels on your building.
Yep, and Solar Holler installed them.
That's awesome. I love the connection. And finally, Aaron Bottomley is the executive director at St. Vincent Mission. Aaron, give us a little background on what you do.
St. Vincent Mission has been serving Eastern Kentucky for about 52 years now. We work within Floyd County, and we provide programs that help people find jobs, help people learn how to fill out a resume, different stuff like that. We also have a sustainable agriculture program called Grow Appalachia, where we help families grow gardens, and different nonprofits also will help them grow gardens. We do assistance such as home repair. We help people with utility bills. On occasion, we have college scholarships that we offer to people, and we also have a food pantry. And so we work within our local community with local and volunteers that come from across the United States
Yeah.
to serve Floyd County.
Super cool.
Super cool.
And I think, Aaron, when I'm hearing you talk about that, I'm reminded of a phrase that Dan just mentioned. He talked about providing solar arrays and solar power for nonprofits. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing there at your organization with solar.
Our goal is to eventually have all of our buildings run off of solar power. Currently, we have our volunteer house, and it's the building that generates the most, that uses the most energy. So that building with two other buildings connected to it are currently run off of a 27 panel solar array. And so that has completely cut our cost of electricity in those buildings. So we just pay the base meter fee. And eventually we'd like to have it on our, we have 3 other buildings that we'd like to have solar on.
Excellent. So Dan, I want to come to you with a question, and then we can kind of just open up the conversation. But one of the things that I hear quite a bit is that West Virginia, with our topography, is not ideal for solar because we're not necessarily in the desert, right? I think that's a fallacy. Obviously, you guys are putting solar panels everywhere. I see them here in Morgantown. I know you guys are having a big impact on that. Talk a little bit about that particular fallacy and why West Virginia, why it makes sense for solar energy here in the Mountain State.
Yeah, well, there are several different ways to install solar. So Evan was talking about some of the large utility scale projects where you've got tens of thousands of panels. That's one type of solar project. There's also, projects.
Did they call that like a solar farm? Is that kind of what that's?
Yeah, you'll hear those referred to as solar farms, solar power plants, utility scale solar.
Okay, gotcha.
All that means the same thing. And essentially what's happening there is you take a big field and install the panels in the field and hook it up to the transmission grid, and you're selling power out onto the utility grid, just like any other power plant. So that's one way to do it. Obviously, in those cases, you need flat-ish ground. It doesn't need to be Kansas, but it needs to. You can't be building it on a cliff. So that's one type of project. The projects that we really focus on are smaller scale. So we install on homes and businesses like downstream, or food banks, and all of these buildings where people are using the power right on site. And nice thing about that is, well, we don't need to worry about whether the land is flat. We just need to worry about whether we can get it on the roof. As far as we model these systems out all the time with really complex topography models and climate data, and we are able to put them in actual haulers now. I mean, like, even with the shading, it really, what matters is, can we make it affordable enough? Can we cover the upfront costs for folks so they're not needing to pay it all up front? And what are your utility rates? And we just throw all of that into the number hopper, do all of our modeling, spit it out, and then we can see exactly what the numbers are going to look like for folks.
Yeah, that's super cool.
So every site is different, but that's why we do those numbers. And I mean, it's making enough sense for us to be doing 400 installations this year for folks where we're actually saving them money right out of the gate.
That's incredible, Andy. I'd love to throw it to you. And one of the things that that Evan was talking about was the job creation of this relatively new industry that's really coming into West Virginia by storm. Quite frankly, even though Dan's been doing this for 8 years, I mean, you guys are really making an impact. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Andy.
Well, certainly, I agree with Senator Manchin's approach that all the above energy strategies necessary
Yes.
for the foreseeable future as we transition. Also, that state of California reported for the first quarter, I believe 95% of their electricity was generated by renewables. So that's pretty significant. Certainly the technology for solar energy and the battery technology needed to go along with it has progressed greatly. I think the reuse of southern West Virginia strip mines for solar array fields is a real opportunity for West Virginia. I think there is some challenges in terms of concerns about, cloud cover, especially here in north central West Virginia, where we get so much lake effect gray days compared to, I'm from southern West Virginia, so it's not as cloudy down there most of the time. I've actually gone on and Dan, with your company, and responded to try to see about my own personal residence. And the obstacle we ran against was simply that my energy provider, which is First Energy, did not participate in, I guess, the sellback program for excess capacity that you generate.
Well, First Energy is my utility as well, and it's Evans, and you are able to get credits on your utility bill.
Okay, well,
there's no limit there.
My response from a phone call from your folks told me that I didn't qualify. So I think there's some questions there. And I was going to follow up, Evan, with you, to make sure that is there any legislation out there that we can do to make sure that any of these applicable credits can be, put into law. We do have the State Public Service Commission that has some authority over those things. We need to do everything we can to encourage those people and the power companies to participate jointly in this green energy approach.
Well,
Yeah,
that was
I'd love to follow up with you, Andy. There are
Sure.
there are some nuances there.
Sure. I have an interest. Okay, so, but as a consumer, it ended in a dead end. Okay, and I would like to, whatever those dead ends are, see how we can knock those barriers down, because it is very much the future and it's available now.
Yeah.
It makes sense on a lot of fronts. And Andy, I agree with what you're saying about, for the immediate future, we need to have a blend of everything. I'm me personally, I'm not so much a fan of the wind farms that we see dotting the mountaintops right now, but I love the solar idea combined with the existing coal infrastructure and other things that we have going on. I think that makes a lot of sense. Evan, if you don't mind, maybe chime in on some of those nuances that Andy was kind of talking about with the buyback and the credits and everything from the power grid.
Well, what that's called is net metering, where when you generate excess electricity on your rooftop more than you're using at that moment, it pushes that electricity back into the grid and you get credit for that when you need it, when your solar panels are generating less than you're using. And that is the law in West Virginia. So the electric utilities need to allow you to net meter. There's certain limits in terms of the amount that you can install on your home. So I don't know your specific situation, but Actually, West Virginia has pretty good net metering laws compared to states around the country. That's one place where
Cool.
we did a good job recently.
Aaron,
And
from your
Aaron, I have to say to you, okay, I love Floyd County. My best friend lives in Floyd County. I went to college with him. I have my first wife was from Prestonsburg, so I'm very familiar with Floyd County, and it's great people down there.
Yeah, no doubt. Aaron, when we came across your story, I thought it was very important to tell that story of nonprofits, especially because Dan, you talked about, and I want to jump back to Dan here in a second, but Aaron, talk a little bit about the importance and what it means to be able to have reliance 100% of all your buildings across the St. Vincent mission, and what that means in terms of cost savings and just quality of life.
Yeah. The reason that we went solar to begin with was so that more income could go into our programs. So we wanted to reduce our overhead expenses overall for the mission and then put more into our programming. So I added up some numbers this morning, and since we did solar, we saved $5,262. And that was just a year, 2 years, and 5 months worth of utility bills. And so I think that's pretty good. And that's just one building, like I said. And so going forward, we would like all of our buildings to be on solar. And then more of that money that we would spend paying the utility bill will be able to go into our programs and support our local community.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. Dan, from the nonprofit sector, are there grants available? How can these nonprofits get involved with converting and making that switch like Aaron's group did, St. Vincent Mission? Talk a little bit about the financing aspect of that for nonprofits, especially.
Yeah, so there are some grants out there. Ultimately, grant funding is always going to be competitive and limited.
Sure.
So what we've done is we've lined up a pool of funding similar to what Evan was talking about with the legislation that just went through. There's a bunch of different flavors of this, but the end result is Solar Holler can front all of the capital costs for a system for a food bank or a church or any nonprofit across the state. And then we'll just do a monthly payment for the life of the system. And that monthly payment will make, if you're saving $500 a month on your utility bill for the church, the monthly payment might be something like $400 or $450 or however the number shakes out. So that way we can offer $50 to $100 a month savings right out of the gate. And then folks don't have to worry about the utility rate hikes in the future. Especially once you get down into southern West Virginia now, AEP rates have been rising really quickly. They raised rates 11% last year. They just proposed another 6% rate hike last week. And kind of the beauty of solar, especially when you're financing it out like this, is exactly what you're paying for your electricity going forward for the next 25 years. You don't have to worry about what's the utility going to do to our budget next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy.
Now, AEP has actually made a commitment in West Virginia to transition to more renewable energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason that they're asking for the rate increases, is in order to make those conversions. I know John Amos Power Plant, which I think was one of the largest ones east of the Mississippi, they're looking at turning that over to from a coal-fired plant to solar array and hydro.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, the rate hike that AP proposed a week or two ago, it wasn't, at least the details I saw weren't related to renewable energy. They were related to energy efficiency programs. The 11% hike last year was just general overhead increases. At least
Actually, what you mentioned about energy efficiency is a little bit of a forgotten item in this whole um, green energy movement. Um, you know, switching to renewables is a great thing, but we also, I don't think in West Virginia have done enough to deal with energy efficiencies uh, in terms of insulation, windows, everything involved in that, the type of lighting that we use. Uh, West Virginia has not been very proactive in promoting energy efficiency.
Hmm.
You're exactly right on that. We're either last or next to last in terms of energy efficiency. And let me just mention one of the bills we just passed this session is related to energy efficiency. It it requires state buildings to save 25% of their
Yes, Clay Riley sponsored that bill, didn't
yeah. So Clay and I worked together on that.
he?
Clay was
Okay, you worked with him on it. Great. Yeah, we were really excited about that bill, and I'm glad to see that it passed. Um, so what's the timeline in order to achieve that reduction?
It's 25% reduction by the year 2030. And then the bill includes some other provisions to help get there. But not
So
only, that's
that's
going to save
all
a lot of
state
time.
buildings.
Yeah, yeah, it's across state buildings.
Fantastic.
So Evan, what kind of practical things, for these state buildings and even businesses, what kind of things could people be looking at to increase that energy efficiency? What are some practical things? Is it just moving from incandescent bulbs to LED? I mean, honestly, I don't know what it
I mean,
could.
that's part of it. It's the things that Andy mentioned. It's lighting, it's insulation, but a lot of the state buildings have old HVAC systems in them. So
Yeah.
heating and air conditioning. If you have an old system, you could be spending way more money on your electricity or other fuels than you would with a high efficiency modern system. Could be replacing windows. And so there's a number of things that could be done, and there are professionals that are qualified to do energy audits or energy assessments that can figure out what needs to be done and calculate what the payback period is.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is implement those things that are going to pay for themselves in just a few years.
So it's not on the commercial side, but just anecdotally for me personally, we live in a 900 square foot cottage, and last winter we replaced. We've always had baseboard heating, and last winter we put in a mini split heat pump, which is both air conditioner and heater, and that cut our winter heating bills from like $400 a month down to about 150.
Wow.
Just that one heat pump switch over. So that's a massive thing on the homeowner side. Some other stuff we're doing in addition to the things already mentioned, we're installing smart thermostats for folks with a kind of help you dial up and down the heating in a smart way based on weather outside. So we've been doing that. There's new water heaters that can cut their usage by 75% compared to standard water heaters. So just lots of electrical appliances that can just be a lot more efficient.
Yeah, so it sounds to me, going back to Andy's initial point of energy efficiency, it sounds to me like it's just a lot of little things that could be simple fixes that add up to massive savings in the long run, not only for government but for business as well, and individual, residents. Is that kind of
And the effect on the environment
yeah.
that it can have. I mean, the energy efficiency side of it could be a big contributor.
Yeah, I think that's
And,
all a great point, Evan.
and on the job side, because these are local HVAC people and
Right.
laborers and construction workers that do the work. It's local work in our communities across the state. And so it's directly tied to jobs and economic growth.
I
Absolutely.
also want to mention the Longview Power Plant is currently installing a large solar array field to make their number of sources. So to add green energy into their mix.
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing.
Good
I
stuff.
think more and more that'll take place.
I want to remind folks who we have as our panel today on the Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind. We have Dan Conant. He's the owner of Solar Holler in Huntington, West Virginia. We have Erin Bottomley. She's the executive director of St. Vincent Mission. Evan Hansen is the owner of Downstream Strategies in Morgantown. Evan also serves as a member of the West Virginia House of Delegates, serving Montague County, and he's on the Energy and Manufacturing Committee currently. Of course, our esteemed publisher, co-host Andy Nicely from WV News as well. Guys, I want to talk a little bit about the current state of business opportunities for the solar industry. We talked about the jobs issue, and I think our show is all obviously about supporting entrepreneurship and small business in terms of leadership. And I think these are great topics we should all be thinking about in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of solar power to provide renewable energy and green energy, not necessarily taking away from coal jobs, but as the country and the current administration is moving more in that shift, we've got to be thinking of ways. We can't just throw up our hands and give up. I would love to hear some of the opportunities that you guys think that are coming down the pipe for folks who may be thinking about starting a support business for the solar industry, or maybe it's how to get into this energy efficiency of homes and those kinds of things. What are some of the opportunities you guys think? Evan, I'd love to start with you first. You're a small business owner. What are some of the opportunities you think are right around the corner for the solar industry?
Well, there's going to be more and more demand for solar installers like Solar Holler. We have a handful of solar installers based in West Virginia, but hopefully there'll be more and more demand, and those companies will grow and new ones may start up.
Yep.
And similarly, there are firms that specialize in energy efficiency, or there are existing firms, like I had mentioned, construction types of firms or HVAC installers that can be knowledgeable about these things and serve that energy efficiency market. But in terms of jobs, one of the things that I think less appreciated is the other types of jobs that will potentially come to West Virginia now that there is access to green electricity. And that's how we were able to get that utility solar bill passed last year, because there were companies considering where to site new operations, and they would get in touch with the Commerce Department in West Virginia and ask about access to solar, and they were told, sorry, you're not allowed to get as much green electricity as you demand. And more companies, not just tech companies, but all types of companies, based on consumer demand, they require some percentage of renewable electricity, sometimes 100%, sometimes less, but they will not site somewhere unless they can access enough renewable electricity. And it's those types of jobs that I'm also really excited about bringing to West Virginia, because we need all types of jobs here. And they were just being shut out until recently.
That's incredible. I didn't even know that was an issue, honestly. In the companies looking to relocate here were, that's a pretty significant roadblock, I would say.
It was. And we had the Secretary of Commerce testify before our committee that sometimes that would be like the second or third question they asked. And if the answer was sorry, they just said, okay, like
take us off the list.
Take them off the list. Yeah.
Google, for instance, just announced that their data centers in Virginia are now powered by renewables 24/7. And it's not just the tech companies, but Google, Facebook, Amazon, any large, virtually all the major corporations nationwide have made 100% clean energy targets and requirements internally. And yeah, if West Virginia wants to compete and have those companies employing West Virginians, we need to be able to provide that clean energy that they need.
Yeah, the one thing I would say to that though is these 100% renewable requirements. See how fast they scramble when the load can't be delivered in peak times when their battery load and the weather doesn't match up to give them 100%. That's a little bit unrealistic.
Well, to be clear, batteries aren't needed in on-site operations. So by connecting into the grid is a really big battery. So you actually
Correct, but by connecting to the grid, you can't guarantee 100% renewable energy.
Over time we will be able to, just with a diversity and mix of sources. So that's why I was just saying Google with their data centers in East Virginia now, they are matching clean energy with their data center usage down to the second level, and on a 24/7 basis. So it's doable, and Google obviously wanted to kind of lead the charge on that and make it possible. But that's an awesome demonstration of what is technically possible out there now.
Aaron, I want to get your thoughts. Obviously, you're in the nonprofit sector there in Eastern Kentucky, and I'd love to just get your thoughts on the importance of that for folks that you're running with in the nonprofit sector, whether it's providing, the services that you do, homeless shelters, and what the types of things that a typical mission would do, a faith-based mission. How important is that in your circle?
How important is what specifically?
Having renewable energy as a primary source.
It's important to us because we want to, leave a good mark on our area. So anything that is renewable, that's clean, is beneficial to just, us as an organization, as well as being able to, set a standard for self-sustainability in our community. So a lot of times when we work with low-income people, our goal is to get them to be self-sustaining, whether it's, getting them a job, helping them get education to get a better job. So we want to set the same example. We want to be able to do things better and for ourselves that will help us to provide for them and kind of set the tone for being self-sustaining.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that answer. Appreciate that. Evan, there's been a lot of talk across the state of West Virginia, especially in North Central and over into Tucker County, particularly with the Virgin Hyperloop. Obviously, that project will be a large user of energy, I would imagine, with the infrastructure that they're trying to build. Did anything come up in legislature surrounding that Hyperloop project over in that part of the state?
Yeah, the plans that I'm aware of are to power it with solar electricity. And I think part of the push for modernizing our laws on solar were to help seal the deal and bring Hyperloop here. Yeah. As one example of an outside company that's looking to site somewhere, and what can we do to make it attractive to come here. So I think that's a good example.
Absolutely.
Can bring lots of jobs.
Yes, that's kind of what I was talking about. So Evan, from your personal experience, as a business owner, what kind of incentives were there out there because it's recently that you guys moved to solar using Dan's company, Solar Holler, for your solar panels at Downstream Strategies. Talk to us a little bit about how that went, and maybe be an encouragement to other business owners thinking about hearing this message and thinking, how can I impact my business with solar?
Well, the bottom line for our business is that the solar panels should be paid for in about 8 years. And after that, we'll have free electricity for a couple decades, other than just like that $5 a month meter charge that we have to pay to Mom Power. The reason why the payback period was only 8 years is, number one, the price of solar has just plummeted over the last decade or so. So it's getting cheaper and cheaper. But small businesses in West Virginia have access to a couple of federal incentives. One is a tax credit for a certain percentage of the investment. And then the other is that the U.S. Department of Agriculture has what they call REAP grants, which solar installations for businesses in West Virginia generally qualify for those. So by the time you add up those two incentives, it reduces the cost and reduces the payback period. So in that sense, it's actually more cost effective for a business to go solar than it is for a nonprofit, because nonprofits don't have a tax liability.
Right,
So tax
exactly.
credits can't be used by a nonprofit. But if you've got the cash available where you could put it up front and have an 8-year payback period in return for free electricity for a couple decades, to me, I think that's a good long-term investment.
Definitely. And Dan, I see you shaking your head. Is that, you're a creative guy? I remember talking to you back in March of last year and telling your story of Solar Holler. But I loved your creativity and being able to solve problems and trying to help people navigate the financing of these solar panels and making the leap or so, if you want to call it that, to solar. Is that something that your company helps folks navigate when you were talking about your number cruncher contraption that you had and you put all the numbers in there and it spits out the...
Yeah, we do that all the time. So and then we work with folks through the USDA grant application as well. So we've got grant writer on staff who just handles that process.
That's cool.
Translating all the tax credits. We get into other crazy incentives that have to do with the regional power grid that we can pull in for folks. And then we also, I spend a lot of my time just lining up the financing for folks so that, we don't want it to be, we don't want the upfront cash to be an impediment for people, because ultimately it doesn't matter how much this stuff is going to save you if the project doesn't get built in the first place.
Yeah.
So we have lined up pools of funding, not just for nonprofits, but also for businesses and for homeowners. And no matter who comes to us now, we can cover the upfront costs and then just use the energy savings to pay for the system.
Yeah. We were speaking of jobs and job creation. We have a viewer, John Sesla, writes in, he says, how far of a leap is it to manufacture solar panels in West Virginia?
It's not a crazy leap, but we do have some limitations. It's always going to be hard getting stuff out of the mountains, and usually panel manufacturing facilities are located close to a port so that you can participate in the worldwide market. The more demand we have locally or within the country, though, then the easier it is to make it work.
I'm sorry.
All just for context, all of our panels that we're installing on homes these days are actually Appalachian made. So they're from we're working with a facility in northern Georgia, in the mountains of northern Georgia right now, that's providing all of our panels. And then there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it too. So there's the panels themselves, but there's all the racking and railing that attaches it to the roof. Or if you're building a carport, that requires a lot of steel. So, one of the nice things in West Virginia is we have lots of steel and aluminum mills up and down the Ohio that can provide that. There's glass that goes into it. There's the copper and the wiring and all the electrical parts. So yes, the panels are a big thing, but I don't want people to get so wrapped up thinking about making the panels that they forget that there's a lot of other components to this supply chain.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Andy, what were you going to ask there?
I was going to ask, what percentage of the solar panels used in the U.S. is made in the U.S.?
Nationwide, or are you talking for?
Nationwide.
Nationwide, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but we're the U.S. right now is making something. When I last checked on this a year or two ago, we were making about 2% to 3% of the world supply of panels, and that has gone up since then. So, but I'm not sure on what the latest stats were.
Because I know it's one of the things that Senator Manchin has talked about in these coal communities in southern West Virginia as jobs to make solar panels. So
Yeah, I'd love to see a lot more of it. Yeah, just the thing to think about is also the transportation networks for getting it out. So just like for generations, we've had to think about how do you move coal out of the coal fields to the power plants? Well, we need to think about the same thing. If you want to make solar panels in Wyoming County, you need to think about how to get the panels from Wyoming County to the places where they're actually going to get installed.
sure, and there's a rail line that goes across southern West Virginia right to the Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia area
Gotcha.
for a port.
Okay.
Dan, I want to, you had mentioned food banks, and I know that's a passion of yours. Recently, I saw somewhere posted that Solar Holler gave a donation, a cash donation to, I think it was called Facing Hunger Food Bank. And I love that. You know, you're like I said, you're a young guy, you're an entrepreneur. You've had your company for 8 years or so. You got 50 employees. Um, could you speak a little bit about the importance of being able to do business in West Virginia, but also to support these nonprofits that you do, you know, such as the Facing Hunger Food Bank and other organizations like Aaron Bottomley's St. Vincent Mission? Talk a little bit about the importance of giving back.
Yeah. I mean, it's ultimately in our DNA, and it's I want to live and work in a place where food banks and community organizations are supported. That's just what I care about. And
Hmm.
you know, our very first projects when I was starting up the company were with a Presbyterian church, a local library, a public library, an affordable housing organization, and a homeless shelter. Those were the very first 4 projects we did. This recent program we did with Facing Hunger Food Bank in Huntington, they had seen a huge increase in demand for just since the pandemic took hold. They saw demand for their food up as much as 50% compared to 2019. And you know, people have been out of work and worried about where their next meal is going to come from. So what we did is we created a Solar for Suppers program where anyone during the months of January, February, and March who came to us and had us crunch the numbers for them. For every one of those, we donated. For every person who came to us, we donated 225 meals to Facing Hunger.
Wow.
And so we just wrapped up that program, and we had about 250 West Virginia residents participate in the program. We were able to donate over 53,000 meals.
Wow.
To Facing Hunger, and it was just really important for us to work with folks to both cut their bills, but also like use that as a way to drive support and talk about the awesome work that Facing Hunger is doing, because at the end of the day we need we need to make sure our neighbors are taken care of.
Yeah, I see Erin shaking her head. She likes that idea too, as a nonprofit, right? Guys, I would like to go around the horn. I would like to talk a little bit about leadership. And over the last 12 or 14 months, we've all had to go through a lot of different change in our organizations, in our, whether you're leading your company or leading in your community or leading your family or leading in the state legislature. I would like to pick your guys' brain and come up with and share one leadership lesson that you've learned over the last year or so. Evan, I'd love to start with you.
All right, well, I'll mention something about trying to have successes at the legislature, which I think is a broader lesson, just not making assumptions about people, and that there's not always, but often common ground with people from different walks of life or different parts of the state or different political parties. And some of the really great work we've got done over the last couple of years has been through finding those connections and working collaboratively with non-traditional partners. So I think that's a lesson not just for passing legislation, but for growing a business as well.
I love that. That's awesome, man. Thank you for sharing it. I appreciate your heart, Evan. Like I said, I've gotten to know you personally over the years, and I just think that what you just said is definitely embodied in your the way you approach things, whether it's in a Rotary Club or your business or in the legislature. And I just appreciate that collaborative approach. Aaron, I'd love to hear your thoughts on a leadership lesson you've learned.
Yeah, I agree with Evan about the importance of collaboration and coming together. We've worked with a lot of nonprofits through the past year where they weren't able to completely help someone, but we were able to jump in and work with them and get whatever needed to happen done. Um, and just because it doesn't look like it's always looked doesn't mean it's not a success. So 2020 required us to do a lot of things differently, but we were still able to continue our services even though it looked a little bit different than what we had hoped for.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Dan, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
A little more pragmatic, but I'm really liking the work from home thing. Yeah, just in terms of productivity, but also recruitment. So one of the nice things for us over the last year has been, we've got our operations base in Huntington. Up until pandemic hit, we had folks working. We had other folks working out of an office in Shepherdstown. And now we're recruiting folks from all over the state. So all of a sudden in the last year, I've got 3 employees living in Morgantown and folks living in Charleston and Lewisburg. And we're able to get lots of really, really talented people who want to work with us and support our mission. And I don't need to tie it to where my office happens to be. And so I think that's been really cool just in terms of bringing more folks to the table, but also just being able to support more communities around West Virginia by allowing people to live and work in the places that they've always been in and want to continue.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love the flexibility of that idea. I do miss meeting with people, but I do appreciate the fact that everybody's been able to adapt. And hearing your all's opinions, Andy, I'd love to hear. You always have some great leadership lessons that come to mind, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question.
Well, I want to applaud Evan and Clay Riley for their efforts to advance renewables and solar energy forward, and make sure that the opportunities are there for people who can make the change. Okay, and I do believe that that's going to continue to grow. The one thing I want to caution is be careful about what we're saying, like where West Virginia is and where other people are. Okay, according to Google, state of Virginia has 6% renewables. According to Google, West Virginia has 6% renewables. Okay, so we can't sell ourselves short. We are moving in the right direction. Okay, and it is going to continue to need to be an all the above strategy for the short term. Okay, we just need to make sure that we all work together and do the best we can to help make the transition.
Well said. Well said. Guys, as we close out our time here today, I'd love to go around the horn once again and just talk a little bit about something you're optimistic about. Obviously, our show is Positively West Virginia, and I love to close our show every week with that thought. Aaron, what's one thing you're optimistic about right now?
I'm optimistic about our ability to be resilient in current times and in current economic situations.
Love it. Evan.
Just building on what Andy said, I agree with what you said about the all the above strategy. And what I'm optimistic about is that we're finally, in my opinion, having an honest debate about this issue in West Virginia related to coal and renewables. And it's often a difficult debate to have, but it's necessary. And we're finally seeing a renewed emphasis on coal communities and what the communities and the people in these towns and rural areas need. That's grounded in the reality of what's happened over the last decade and what's probably going to happen in the future. So I think we're going to be able to start to solve some of these issues now that we're having a real debate about it.
Yeah, I like that. Evan, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Dan, what's one thing you're optimistic about right now?
I kind of piggybacking off of that, I've been really encouraged by the support that we are seeing nationwide for renewables. The United Mine Workers of America just came out in full-blown support for the clean energy transition, and given our work with labor and the excitement that labor is showing for this transition, I think there's a lot of good partnerships and a lot of good work to be done there by bringing more folks to the table.
I think that's awesome. I love the spirit of collaboration and the optimism you guys are bringing to the table. I think about, diversifying of the West Virginia economy is something that's a common thread on this show. I mean, it just seems like every week we talk about we need diversity, and the things that we're talking about, Evan, your point about bringing people to the table and having real honest dialogue and open dialogue, I think is very encouraging as well. And I think that we are we are in this world together. To pick up on Evan's name of his business is Downstream Strategies, and we all live downstream from somebody, right? And so we've got to protect our resources. I love to fish in the West Virginia waters here, and I love clean water. I love clean air. I think the fact is that we, as a group of statewide people and in our country, we've got a commitment to making sure that we're being responsible, right? We're taking care of each other and taking care of our environment at the same time. Not to say that I'm a staunch advocate of entrepreneurship, especially small business. I love small business people just like you guys and what you're doing. And I'm just motivated and encouraged by some of the conversation we've had today, just learning more about what's happening right now in West Virginia with renewable energy and solar, especially. Dan, my hat's off to you and your company. I love what you guys are doing. Evan, thank you for your service. Aaron, it was great to hear your story as well. I appreciate what you're doing over there in Eastern Kentucky. And Andy, again, thanks for co-hosting and bringing some real thought-provoking questions and comments to the conversation. Our guests once again today were Dan Conant. Dan is the owner of Solar Holler in Huntington. Aaron Bottomley, the executive director of St. Vincent Mission. Evan Hansen, owner of Downstream Strategies in Morgantown, and of course, esteemed member of the West Virginia House of Delegates and serving on the Energy and Manufacturing Committee. And of course, our co-host this week is Andy Nicely, publisher at WV News. Guys, thank you so much for being a panelist today. You guys really brought your A game, and I appreciate every one of you. Folks, that's it for today's Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind. Our hope is that we brought you some valuable insight, especially into this energy concept that you could use in your business today to win. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for the Positively West Virginia Small Business Mastermind, and they include the State Journal, WVNews.com, and Interaction Media. Positively West Virginia is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. You can learn more about our mission of advancing small business and entrepreneurship in West Virginia at positivelywv.com. On behalf of our entire Interaction Media team, including our producer today, Mr. Eric Tomlinson, I'm your host, Jim Matuga. Stay positive, West Virginia.